to me to present my work. I'm not going to really give a lecture on biodiversity or green spaces, but I'm really going to talk about my experience of all the kind of mapping and research work that I had been doing and how it helped me develop and reach to some interesting conclusions. I would also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Vijaya Bharat for introducing me to this whole topic and obviously to the area of Jamshedpur. So I'll begin by sharing my screen, and the title for my talk today is The Green Mosaic, the role of built environment in enhancing the biodiversity. And as the main quote of this entire talk series, which is reimagine, rethink, and restore, and I really abide by what that each of those words that actually mean. Um, long back when this study actually began was when I read this statement by the Center for International Earth Science Information Network in 2004 and then by the UN in 2008, which kind of mentioned that the urban areas cover only 2.7% of the world's surface. And urbanization is mostly likely to decrease the biodiversity around us. Very quickly about biodiversity in urban cities. So we all know about urban ecology and we also know the meaning of the word ecology. What role urban context plays in this case is that in the urban environment, the green spaces, gray sites, gray spaces, private gardens, balconies, each of them have their own opportunities and each of them have their own potentials of actually enhancing the biodiversity in some way or the other. And if you actually see all these spaces, it's in a variation of scale, starting to what individual can do, to what larger institutional or government bodies can do, to what private sector agencies can do. Fauna species in rural areas are very few in numbers, and hence they sustain themselves in that natural habitat for a very long time. But what happens in cities is the cycle between the species of the flora and the fauna is very limited. So smaller modification in the city environment can lead to vast changes in this habitat or the biodiversity patterns that we see. Urban green spaces, again, I said, would include anything starting from your doorstep or the communal green spaces to institutional lands and campuses, parks and gardens or private residential gardens, river and riverine corridors and the floodplains, and the larger coastal zone or the larger eco-sensitive zone. So I'll quickly begin now with my study. So as a part of my landscape studies, I was really keen on understanding this biodiversity in the city of Ahmedabad. So if what you see on the left is this larger zonal map of Ahmedabad and how the north, south, east, west, and the northeast and the central are kind of divided, and the river runs in the middle of the entire city, dividing it into the old city and the new city, if I may say so. And the larger categories that one comes across in this city in terms of its landscape character or the typological difference is the river and the lakes, the institutional campuses because they are really good in number and really designed well, the parks and the gardens, the entire grid of the old city or the densified built areas of the city, and large temple complexes. So these were the initial categorization based on which I started with my study. The number 1 to 11 are some of these locations as mentioned in the categories. So how this study actually began was I started looking at all these places and how fauna and the flora started associating with them. So a very quick photo documentation of the, if you see on here where my cursor is actually the Google map of that site, and you could read the green and the land and the river, and then some photographs of what kind of faunal variation one could come across, and which were the prominent fauna and which were the prominent flora. So one on the extreme right is the Sabarmati River upstream, then the Gandhi Ashram, uh, then two of the very important, or you could say big lakes, which are man-made now, like completely boundaried with cemented waterbeds and things like that. But still, the scale of it at a city level does encourage this kind of biodiversity. And then the river in the downstream and some other campuses and open ground. Uh, and when we talk about campuses like Center for Environmental Education, the CEE or the CEPT campus are some of them which still hold that extent of biodiversity in them. So then I actually came down to my study for the CEPT campus, and this actually was an initiative also by the president of the school, Dr. Bimal Patel, because there was a lot of built construction changes that were happening on campus. So there was a very obvious response that a lot of trees are then going to be cut down and the biodiversity is going to be lost. But on the contrary, what we found out was that a lot of important trees, and thanks to the kind of studies we did there, helped in preserving those trees and keeping that biodiversity intact. So only those species which were really of not much of an importance or what were not contributing to the biodiversity were kind of removed. So, and why this study became important also was that these faunal variations, reduction in their numbers or they being the main agent for pollination, they have an immense psychological impact on the people who use these spaces. So these are the important indicators why this type of fauna species, and why I'm saying fauna is because my study included birds, bees, butterflies, I mean, literally from dogs, cats, lizards, and everything. So a part of this study also got featured in the Times of India, where then there was a mention that a similar work had been done at IIM and then for the Gujarat University camper by their directors at that time. And I was very happy that this kind of study has started people to think about these educational campuses in Ahmedabad. Followed by that, I did a detailed biodiversity mapping. And what we see here is the biodiversity map, which I had eventually made for the CEPT campus. So the one on the left is talking of the entire campus plan with all the important species that were marked. And what I tried to associate through photographs were those biodiversity connections. So, where will you spot a parrot and what is the tree that then it needs to feed on or nest? And then the coppersmith barbet and the red-winged woodpecker. And trust me, all these photographs are from campus. I mean, the study went on for 6 to 8 months with all the photographs that were clicked. But I mean, we were lucky that there's a baobab next to the campus, and we were immensely happy to see it flower and then go leafless and look at the entire form. Also, what we realized by the time I was doing this study, what I realized was that when this campus was set up, there were many specimen trees that were planted, keeping in mind the biodiversity of the cities. And now, since the campus is more than 50 years old, these trees have thrived and they have really reached that peak and contribute a lot to this biodiversity. And then what you see on the left are all those photographs of the birds and those prominent trees that one would come across on campus. Similar to that, we also did this little like a tag, the IS code tags that we did for the trees, where we actually generated IS codes for each of these species, tagged them under tree, and then made a detailed inventory for that. Which what it did was these tags, when anybody on the campus or the interested people scan, or when this map, if somebody is carrying and is trying to walk in this place, tries to understand these biodiversity associations, they can understand, oh, so if this is a ficus, say a bengalensis or a banyan tree, or if it is an African tulip, I will be able to spot this bird, or I'll be able to spot this animal, or any kind of fauna species on that. So it was just trying to make people aware of the surrounding and connect to them. Again, in continuation to the study, an interesting thing as a part of economics of environment, a subject that I was studying, was when I tried to understand the replacement cost method by economically evaluating this. So I took the example of a zoo where you have a lot of animals that are kept versus the CEPT campus where there was already a natural biodiversity which was present. So the services that the natural biodiversity on campus which was giving us in free was what we had to pay for to keep actually a human built landscape in place or kind of maintain it. So it was very interesting to find out that hence what is the value of a tree, or what is the value of the 100 trees or the campus, and what is the kind of care that they take of the other fauna species around it. So I mean, it was interesting that the amount of ecological service, only a part which the CEPT campus currently gives, is worth 7,20,000 a year, which people at Kankaria have to actually put in that money and get those things done, which the campus is right now doing it for free. Because I mean, as a part of the study and a lot of literature reading, I also came across the idea that when something is monetized, sometimes it helps, because then you know that a cost is associated in cutting down that tree or ruining an ecosystem, which otherwise the ecosystem does free for you. Again, more like a concluding to that study and the academic career in that sense of being a landscape architect. Then I had proposed a zoological park for Baroda, which was a master plan proposal. So again, there the study began by understanding the faunal habitat, what is the kind of environment they live in, and then through my master plan, I tried to put that association there. So this design was for a 300-acre zoological park for the city of Baroda. It was an academic project, but I was lucky enough to present it in Zootopia to Niti Aayog very recently, because now they have taken up this initiative of involving designers and landscape architects in the process of zoo design, which is right now at a very crucial phase in our country, if we may say so. And my theme of designing was the biogeographic grouping. What interested me in doing this was a few facts, that while I was studying this, I found out that there were a lot of original species of animals which existed in the vicinity of Baroda. And these animals had got extinct because of the urbanization. So through the zoological park, it was very great to bring them back. So it was not really getting alien species back, but actually species who thrived there earlier. And a lot of other, these were the few key aspects that I had taken into account while I did this planning. So, the fauna vulnerability status, a lot of species we know are vulnerable or they might get extinct. So, including that as a part of the design, or understanding favorable habitat conditions, if we are talking of a biodiversity park or we are talking of an eco reserve center or something like that. Currently, as a part of the academic, I'm also working on this an exhibition which is called Vad of Vadodara. So so as you know, the name Vad in the name Vadodara is because of the banyan tree association. And there were a lot of stories which are associated with. There are numerous number of banyan trees in Baroda, but actually there is no statistics or there are no records for those trees. So through this student come city people's initiative through the Navrashwan University that I'm currently associated with it, we are really working on mapping on Cartomap using GIS locations, that we actually ask people and ourselves go to the location, take the coordinates and start mapping it on the Cartomap, and eventually get a digital map saying that these are the number of trees. And I've just tried to show a little hint, like this is the city of Baroda, and what you see on the right circles, the red dots are the number of trees that you come across while moving on roadside. So biodiversity mapping of Baroda city with the association of these trees, and visual narratives of the stories associated is some of the work that help in understanding this green mosaic. So now my idea of showing all this work that I did in Ahmedabad was just to give you a sense that it's not only about literature or theories that we only keep talking about, but actually when we try seeing that in person in the actual city is what helps us to understand. And along with a lot of municipal corporation help, like talking about the gardens and parks of Ahmedabad, or even with we are working on making biodiversity map for gardens of Ahmedabad, because some of the gardens in Ahmedabad are really well designed, or not, if not even well designed, they hold a lot of biodiversity rich component to it. So not just that I'm interested in doing, but then having it from the others who are into the legal bodies also helps a lot. So now if we come really down to Jamshedpur, and what really interested me to become a part of this talk was the setting of the entire place. You have this amazing mountain, and at the foothills of it, in the middle of the two rivers. So the land is extremely rich and fertile. I mean, the city is around 130 years old, but it's in the most fertile plain with the rivers, with the kind of soil it has, and hence it has an amazing green cover. And I mean, while I was talking to Dr. Vijaya Bharat, I came across a lot of statistics and some reports that she shared, that more than 30% is what is the vegetative cover that already exists, which is like a rich thing. So how do you really take that a step ahead rather than only saying that this is there? So these beautiful wildlife sanctuaries that we have in Jharkhand, and some of these smaller reserve or nature reserve areas that are there in the part of the city. And if we actually go back to the older part of the cities and we see these huge trees with some of these old photographs, we do come across that there has always been a sensitive approach from the beginning. And I think Mr. Chanakya like very correctly pointed it out, that it actually began from the original thinkers of the Tata Steel, that how nature is an important part to the entire setting. And so a lot of these trees and avenues were also planned at the time the city was really set up. And unlike other cities and towns, what we see, I mean, of what I have also come across in and around Gujarat and other parts of Gujarat and Maharashtra and Rajasthan, Jamshedpur has Tata Steel as the center, and everything kind of revolves around it. So the hold of it on the overall planning has always been a very fruitful thing, which unlike other cities where it started with a fortified town and the city kind of grew. So the connect with the nature was very different versus what you see here. I have always been in love with Jungle Book and the way, how that little child thrives in that entire natural setting. I mean, I make sure I have this slide always in one of my presentations. So it actually provokes a question that how can we get more sensitive about, such environmental conditions and try and coexist with nature rather than trying to rule over it. And my take here also suggests that there is always this little line between what is then important. Is the nature more important or is the development more important? And most of the time we see that development takes over nature. But I think it in a very different way, that there are ways to have both happening together rather than compromising on either of. So I think rather than cribbing about the fact that you are ruining this habitat, you are ruining this nature, why can't the development incorporate that in a way that it proves potential? So what can we really do about this? So in case of Jamshedpur, identifying the strength is the first thing. And I think most of us have done that. So the forest cover, the rich forest cover that it has, the series of, fauna and floral associations that it has, the flowing river and its riparian vegetation. And if you actually see in this Google Earth image, the river channel has not been channelized. It is still natural. So there is a lot of hope in terms of even thinking about this. And smaller areas with dense vegetation, incorporating them in the initial development of the city plan. Progress directed by the community and supported by the city. So, involving the external agencies to monitor and maintain this. And in case of Jamshedpur, we have the Jamshedpur Tata Steel industry, which is really taking up that initiative. And the entire hold they would then have in governance and the idea of legality. This is a photograph of Rajendra Singh. He's called the Waterman of India. And he has really worked with the locals on getting a lot of water systems in the region of Rajasthan actually in place. So incorporating the existing nature. This is a photograph from like a Japanese railway station, which was actually designed around a 700-year-old tree. So, identifying this potential or identifying the nature, what exists in the cities and really building around it rather than cutting it down completely. And the fringe, if we call the urban and the rural fringe, is always very interesting. The place where you actually pause and spend the time, the place of attachment, or you see your house or the neighborhood and the city. So these fringes become extremely important because how you deal with this fringe will actually make you relate to what is then happening next to that. So is it an extent of urbanization that continues? Is it really weaving it into the nature, or is it completely abandoning the rural and saying leave this? Because I think today the time is where if you say leave this, it's going to become more difficult, because that leaving it away will have no hold on what is then going to happen to it. Carefully managed nature and like nature preserved areas and maintaining the biodiversity. So using of the local flora, fauna through this biodiversity mapping and other things, where even we were then able to suggest that, have these. So even when I worked with the flower show for the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, we started thinking that we did not really get alien species from outside. Sorry.
Mr. Sanath, if you can just mute yourself, huh? You've got unmuted.
Sorry.
Okay. So, incorporating this local flora species and sustaining them into the biodiversity helps it to create or, eventually lead to a self-sustaining ecosystem. This photograph is of the Karst Plateau in Maharashtra. The story behind it is what you see today in the Karst Plateau was never native. It was actually bought in. But then the way it got weaved into the landscape and the whole nature in that area, now it is all natural. So it's during some years of the blossom, when you actually see this entire valley of this color or some other color, and everything has become native now. So and I mean, while I was studying, I also found out that a lot of times, like so for example, in the context of Ahmedabad, a lot of species are not really native, but the way they had come and now the way they sit here have made them become native. So they kind of gel with the surrounding. But today, if we see a lot of campuses and lot of high-rise community space, high-rise community housing areas, and a lot of them, they all want to beautify the space by putting khajuri or palm to an extent that you start feeling it to be some Middle East place, but they're not native, and there are ways to actually plant the natives to bring in the biodiversity. And what this also helps in doing is connecting the green. Having one location in your house which is green and expecting the birds to come is really not going to happen. You have to actually build it over through the city. So coming next is the community-based natural resource management system. So, involving the community, how the old traditional knowledge, what they have in conserving the biodiversity around them, or taking up a lot of community-based research management practices, which support their livelihood as well as help in maintaining the ecosystem. This was a work done by one of my batchmates for his thesis work, which was called Below Zero. So it was transferring the agricultural and cultural heritage of the Kuttanad region in Kerala. Respecting nature. So one of the very good examples by Shabir Unwala, the forest Machan at Lonavala. This is only one photograph, but there's one photograph in which, if you actually see it, say 50, 100 meters, not even 100 actually, 500 meters away from this site, you only see the trees, and there's a very fine line of the building that you actually see. And if anybody gets a chance, it's a great place to visit. They actually have the trunk going right in the center of the entire Machan that has been built. And a lot of adaptation to micro level planning approaches to sustainability and people's active involvement through the traditional knowledge. So as I also spoke of Rajendra Singh and his knowledge about water harvesting system, a lot of people have now started getting into organic farming and, trying to produce which really locally grows there rather than bringing in cash crops and trying to completely change the soil and the other stratas of the ground. And, using recycled water for gardening, a couple of these things. Thank you. I know it just finished very quickly, but I think that's something that I really wanted to say. So I hope you all enjoyed what